So moving on to the next is we have a very exciting panel discussion. And leading this panel discussion is CRIS TRAN, Country Head at Infinity Blockchain Ventures and Director at QRC Group. CRIS has also been featured in Bloomberg, Forbes, Nikkei, and now BlockShow. So our next panel will discuss regulatory sandboxes across the APAC, current state and future tendencies. Everyone, please put your hands together and welcome on stage CRIS TRAN and our panel of experts.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone have a good afternoon? Not so good, not so good. If you don't feel awake yet, there's plenty of coffee outside, so please grab a coffee and then come back. We have an excellent panel today. So before I start everything, let our panelists introduce briefly about themselves and where they're from. Let's start with Mr. Yang.
Hello everyone, my name is Giang Le. I'm from the Ministry of Justice of Vietnam. I mainly focus on prepare legal draft and advise the government on how to enforce the law.
MASTURA.
Hello, I'm MASTURA. I'm from MITE Malaysia, which is under Prime Minister's Department.
Hi, my name is AUNCHISA. I'm from the Securities and Exchange Commission Thailand, FinTech department. So in the past, I've been involved with FinTech Act and also Royal Decree on Digital Assets as well.
And my name is Chris. I'm with Infinity Blockchain Ventures. We actually having office all over Asia, like Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Japan, China, and stuff like that. And actually, the panelists that we have today are quite close. I would say like blockchain friends that I have within our network as well. And I'm very glad that we can invite them today for the panel. So as you can see, right, the panelists today are coming from 3 of the, 10 ASEAN country here we have in Asia. So today we're gonna listen to their story and, all of the development from their side in terms of sandbox. Before we start everything, let's have a scene-setting kind of questions. Very brief, can you tell the audience where we are in terms of, regulation for cryptocurrency in your country? Let's start with Thailand.
So for Thailand, the policy-making part is quite progressive on digital assets. This year, mid-year, we have issued law, it's called Royal Decree on Digital Assets, which govern the entire digital assets, cryptocurrencies, investment tokens, utility tokens, and it falls under the SEC responsibilities to regulate 2 types of activities. The first is the offering of the tokens, and the second is the business related to digital assets.
Right. How about Malaysia?
Okay, in Malaysia, cryptocurrency is not recognized as a legal tender. And financial industry is heavily, more than 100% regulated, and it's under the purview of Securities Commission and Bank Negara, or the Central Bank of Malaysia. But we've had some very interesting use case that actually there was an announcement this morning by Securities Commission, who have just finished a trial or POC using blockchain on over-the-counter transactions and successfully done.
Interesting. How about Vietnam?
In Vietnam, the government started to pay attention to cryptocurrency last year when the Prime Minister, he directed the Ministry of Justice of Vietnam in collaboration with other stakeholders to prepare the legal framework. But thirdly, we have to review the current legal system and to study what is the nature of cryptocurrency. Then we make a policy recommendation to Prime Minister, and it was submitted to Prime Minister last October. Besides prepare legal framework for cryptocurrency and crypto assets, the State Bank of Vietnam, they also issue many notice to the markets that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is not legal payment in Vietnam.
Right. So I still continue with you. Let's start the first question on the, regulation, the sandbox. What are the current stage regarding, sandbox for Vietnam? What are the definition of sandbox in Vietnam at the moment? What are the current stage and how did it start? Who involved and everything?
Actually, right now we don't have like official sandbox for financial or fintech or anything in Vietnam. We are in preparing. But from my perspective, sandbox is like controlled environment where many business, many startup companies, they can like introduce new good or service to a controlled environment. Then government will have chance to work with government to test the product before the government can make any regulation.
Right. Anything else from Malaysia side?
Well, in Malaysia, there's been 2 regulatory sandbox that has been completed successfully. The first one was run by Bank Negara in 2016. It's called FinTech Regulatory Sandbox. And actually, the second one was run by Securities Commission under their affinity program. And that's the recent announcement was the culmination of this experiment. Sandbox is not so much about trying everything. There's a certain scope of work that's being specified for that space, but basically allows you to test it in live environment.
Is that the same case for Thailand as well, AUNCHISA?
Definitely. I mean, that's the point of having the sandbox in the first place. For businesses, it's a playground for you to try out your product within a safe space, and with not so much burdens to comply with the entire regulation. For example, you don't need to apply for license to be in the sandbox, and that saves cost and then time for you to put your product into the market. For regulators, it's a great tool for us to also learn from businesses, especially with you bringing new innovation into the market. We can collect information and continue learning, within the sandbox space, and then eventually use this information to come up with a final regulation that is sensible. And at the same time, we want to strike the balance between innovation, but as a regulator, we still care so much about investor protection. So this is a tool for us to try to find a way to balance that and then make it work for everyone.
Understood. So stick with Thailand. Is there any common product that we have seen so far in that, sandbox space in Thailand? What are those? Can you share some of the example with the audience, or do we have any?
So the current sandbox framework, because the regulation in Thailand is basically activity-based, so it's by activity. So right now, the sandbox that we put up is on electronic trading platform, clearing and settlement, investment advisor, and private fund as well. And all of them, if you want to use blockchain and implement it into those type of activities, you can just come to Thailand right now and enter into our sandbox. Going forward, as I said, that we already have issued the Digital Asset Act. Right now, we have a framework already clearly set up for how the token should be regulated or issued in Thailand, right? But going forward, we want to also introduce sandbox for different types of token offerings. So right now, you can only issue the utility tokens and investment tokens. But going forward with tokenization of assets, for example, next year we hopefully we would launch the regulatory sandbox for that. And it's a great thing because it's really a push from our industry, our business as well. They come to us and say, hey, can you have this scheme in place so I can try it out? Because they are also learning about new technology as well. And these players are not from the very techy side, right? They are, for example, real estate developers, and that want to try out this new technology. So I think this will create a much clearer framework, and at the same time, we can continue learning together with them.
I think actually after this question, we want to see the show of hands. How many people want to go to Thailand? How many people want to go to Vietnam and Malaysia to set up their business there? And these are the key person that maybe you should in contact with if you want to push your business into this country. So go back to the question, MASTURA. I think Thailand had did an excellent pitch about Thailand, you guys should go to Thailand, but how about Malaysia? In terms of products wise, what have you seen in Malaysia so far?
Well, okay. The sandboxes that we have had actually, which has been completed, is basically for financial products. But in other applications or in other industries, we do not want, I don't think we need to have sandboxes, because it's really the industry standards that will set or that you have to follow in order to make sure that your blockchain applications is successful. But in case you missed it, next year it was announced in the recent budget that we are going to regulate the cryptocurrency or the what you call this, exchanges. And SC, I think, will start engaging stakeholders and probably come out with some kind of regulations to make it easy for the industry players to come in. So in case you missed it, we are moving forward with that, and Malaysia welcomes you to invest in it.
That's good news as well. So we have Vietnam next. Can you share?
That's very interesting in Vietnam when the different activity, different service was assigned to different ministry. For example, in Vietnam now, Ministry of Justice is in charge of preparing legal framework for cryptocurrency. But the State Bank of Vietnam also instructed by government to prepare a sandbox for FinTech. And in the sandbox, I believe that some people have chance to look at the proposal from State Bank of Vietnam. They also they want to include cryptocurrency and crypto asset in the FinTech sandbox. But basically, the government of Vietnam, they want to foster the innovation. Why they want to protect the citizens, protect the customer? So it's very tough for the government to how to balance between the foster innovation and maintains fair markets, protects the customer, protects the investor. And we in the sandbox, FinTech sandbox of Vietnam, I do see that State Bank of Vietnam, they are prioritizing some activity and some service, not all the thing, all the service when people put into the sandbox, but they based on the economic condition of Vietnam and based on the development of Vietnam, they will choose some priority activity that will be put into sandbox.
So it's looked like all three of the countries that we have in the panels today do have a sandbox. But for this question, actually, you can share from your personal point of view or as well as the government point of view as well. Do you think sandbox is really necessary for adopting something like blockchain going forward? So that is the question. So maybe I go back to Thailand again.
I think because if you talk about blockchain, the application is really huge, and the application of it, and then the legal structure of our country, with technology and legal structure, it's always the legal structure that gonna run after the technology, and what you want to implement and the application might not fit neatly into the existing regulation. I think in that case I think sandbox would come in handy, because with the law it takes a long time to change things, and innovation cannot wait, technology cannot wait. If you're a CEO having to pay salary every month, you're not going to have that patience to wait, right? So sandbox is an interim solution, that it helps the people who have innovative ideas to be able to test that product, but at the same time we can continue learning while we're kind of harness our existing legal framework to make it work for the technology. So in a way, I think it's a good tool to have, but at the same time, people often mistaken having the regulatory sandbox as a solution for innovation, but that's not true. There are other elements that needs to be put into place as well. For example, first and foremost important thing is definitely, I think you will agree with me, is the mindset of the policymaker. You have to be able to adapt and be agile with technology as well. And secondly is communication. You're having a sandbox. What does that mean, right? You come and asking us. So I think even with the sandbox, having a sandbox doesn't mean having a clarity on what you're going to do or what businesses can do. But even within the sandbox, you have to provide the clarity within that sandbox as well. For example, example, if the business enter into the sandbox, when are they going to graduate? How are they going to graduate? If they are going out of the sandbox, are there any licenses that require for them? Are there additional requirements that will have to comply? At what time that they will have to be able to do all that? Those elements are most important thing because it gives the business direction on where they're going to go. And lastly, I think it's also the proactive approach from the regulator, policymaker side as well. You cannot just wait for the business to come to you and say, hey, we want this or that, right? I think it's important for you to create a space for them that they feel comfortable to come and talk to you so that you can work together.
Okay, I think regulatory sandboxes are perfect when the environment is highly controlled, highly regulated, and we've done that with FinTech. I don't think there is a need to repeat it again, especially as the technology or what we understand as blockchain is actually evolving very, very fast. So there's the new types and all kinds of permutation that's coming out of it. If you have a sandbox, you will have a very specific scope of what you can and you cannot do, and that might be one thing that will hinder innovation. So I think we need to go to the next step or the next level and actually just promote innovation, promote POC, pilot projects and real projects, and just let people have the industry, especially to have some freedom to actually test this thing on their own. Especially if it's not financial application, non-financial application. I think that's the way that we should go now.
For me, Sandbox is a place where the business or developer, they can partner with the government to test the product or prospect or service which is really new. I mean new that we don't know how to fit into the current system of the legal framework. But so the Sandbox is not specifically for any specific technology like blockchain or cryptographic. It's where the business work with government to test new product. And if you come into Sandbox and partner with the government, the problem here is you diagnose some problem from the market and you offer the solution. If the solution requires the compliance with the current system, the government may help you to reduce some recovered regulation. But basically, that's the mitigation for compliance only apply to the product or service you offer, not everything. Basically, you have to comply with the current system. For example, you guys come to the FinTech regulatory sandbox. You offer KYC service, but you also do use hire some engineer. So you have to comply with labor law, how you pay salary to the engineer. You also comply with the tax law. How do you pay tax to the government? But for the specific good or service you offer, you may receive some mitigation from the government, and government should work with you how to deploy the service or goods.
So I have this interesting question, and this one for not everyone. If you have the answer, you can just jump in. Is there any misconception about the sandbox in your country? People think of it like a magic box, or if you get in there, you will get the license or something. I mean, any misconception? Maybe I start with Vietnam.
It is. In Vietnam, many startups and many companies, they blame on the government. They say that they cannot develop the business or expand the business because there are no clear regulation. And they normally come to government and say that, hey, if you have the sandbox, we don't have to comply with anything. We can test anything. We can provide any good or service without compliance. But why some company? They also say that, okay, if Vietnam prepare a sandbox, it should be localized to support the domestic industry. But there are also other guys. They are very huge company, and they have good human resource. They say that no, sandbox should not be localized to the current condition of Vietnam. They should internationally, so the company from Vietnam can expand the business to the other country. So that's very big challenges for the regulator like me.
So basically, they think of sandbox is where
have
you
to
don't have to follow the rules. You just be freestyle and whatever. So yeah, okay. Any other
I
misconception?
don't think there was any or major misconception about, because it's very, very focused and very well defined. Both.
But from Malaysia point of view, like, do you think like sandbox is really in place, in a good place to prevent some other stuff, like
I think in Malaysia, I mean, the 2 sandboxes that was done from the government side had actually concentrated on FinTech itself. So, you know, they actually know what they were getting into when they went in there. It was quite strict. And those who actually came out tops from the program really have some very, very good offerings.
Perhaps quite counterintuitively, you suggest that sandbox is like a golden key. But some people actually think sandbox equal to prison. You go in there, you can't get out ever, right? That's also one of the perception that business might tend to have with the regulatory sandbox, because they don't believe that eventually they will be able to graduate from the sandbox, or they don't believe that the regulator is going to be able to come up with, you know, a regulation so fast within 6 months, within 1 year, to be able to help them to fully operate in the market. But with that conception is also the misconception from the regulatory side as well. Usually, you know, it's like a good or nice thing to have in your KPI. Oh, I have a sandbox ready. You can advertise it, you can put it in the media, and it looks really good. But it you know, it can backfire when you think you have this thing in place, and you stop, you know, creating, or you stop learning on where the industry is going just because you have so-called sandbox in place. I think that's a very dangerous mindset to have. Having a sandbox doesn't mean you have the solution. You still need to continue learning. That sandbox can still like evolve, and it needs to be evolved to catch up with the industry, especially the industry that is so fast-paced as blockchain industry. So regulators have to be aware, and they shouldn't fool themselves by just, you know, just because you have something in place. If it doesn't work, meaning if you have put up the regulation, the sandbox, for a few months, many years, and no one actually come to you and use it, that's a warning. You actually have a problem. Something might be wrong with your sandbox. Is it too rigid that no one can even comply with the sandbox program? That you have to fix and make it more flexible to make it work.
So that led me to the next question. Is basically sandbox is just basically the start of the journey. It's not really stopping there. So what the government, or, you know, like the startups should look for, you know, like after they basically apply for a sandbox, get in a sandbox, then what potentially can happen next and after that? Actually, I think you already touched a bit on that as well. But do you think like government will play a role in actually connecting, you know, like the projects within the sandbox to the suitable, you know, like corporate clients that may needs or require those solutions? Do you think the government can step in to do that, or just simply, you know, like you really on your own? What do you think?
I think definitely it's like our job and our role to actually step in, because like, as I said, in Thailand it's activity based, but at the same time with technology, you know, there's a lot of interconnectedness like with the product. So it might not just, that product itself might not just fall into the SEC, for example. It might also fall into the BOT, the Bank of Thailand regulation. So I mean, if they come to you, right, like, and you see this, I think it's definitely our job and our role to facilitate, act as a facilitator for businesses, so so that innovation can happen.
Malaysia?
I think, like what Om was saying earlier, sandbox is about testing an idea in a safe environment. It may work or it might not work. And also when you talk about use cases after the sandbox, again, you have to refer back to the user or the demand side and find out what they really need. It might not be something that you've tested in the sandbox, but it has given you, you know, at least an exposure. on how it looks like on the regulatory side, or how regulatory side will react to your experiments and stuff. In the end, I'm not sure about other countries, but in Malaysia, the government has been trying to move into a new mode called industry-led initiatives since 2011, and we see that blockchain has a lot of potential because the industry is moving a lot faster than government in this sphere. Agility, and there's so much change and everything is very, very fast. So I think in this thing, there's no guarantee after the sandbox, but we do monitor whatever the development that's going on in the sphere based on the experience that we've had from the sandbox itself.
I think that the sandbox is a starting point when the government now we're facing with many challenges in regulated markets, because emerging technology is makes the policymaker and regulators hard to evaluate any policy or regulation. Normally we start with a new good or service or new activity from the markets, then we make evaluation. But with the blockchain, AI, Internet of Things, it's tough for government to make the policy analysis. Normally it's our term. So the government should start with the sandbox. But sandbox, do you know how sandbox will be exist? I don't think that sandbox will exist forever. The starting point, and so basically the government should change the way they make regulation. So normally the government, they make regulation, they forget it, and they let the markets comply. But now with the new technology, the government should make a regulation more adaptive. It means we not just make a regulation, put into play, and let the market, let the business comply. We need to work frequently with the market. I mean, there should be some flexibility in regulation space. We need hard space like statutes, international treaty, but we also need to foster self-regulation from the markets. And the second thing is we will not tell the business or developer how to develop the product or how to develop the service. We just say that focus on outcome of the innovation, outcome of technology, what kind of the good or service you provide into the market. The regulations should focus on that. And the second thing is the government should focus on reach. If there's reach to the markets, there should be an intervention from the government. That's my point of view.
So I think, we are not really sure how's the sandbox direction going to go forward. Of course, it's going to play a very important role. But one thing for sure that because of these advanced technology like blockchain, AI, actually it's more study for the government side. You guys have to go back to study about this technology much more than ever before. Much more research, much more study. It's not simple for the regulator side at all. So I think we're going to my last questions. It's look like sandbox is not the only way for blockchain startups out there to really push for your product to get to the stage of adoption. What are some of the other journey that the startup can look at if they want to play around and try to push for better adoption of their solution. One of the example could be they work. I think before that question can be sandbox are real. Do you think sandbox is really only for financial related products or not? And then if there's other type of application from other sector, should they follow the sandbox approach as well, or they just go work directly with ministry or corporate clients, something like that?
Basically, we have the sandbox for the financial, because the financial is a very highly regulated market, and we do see a lot of investment, and many people pay attention to the space. That's why the government should start with the financial sector. But for other, I'm not sure, because we need lesson first, and we have a few real application or few sample to evaluate. So I think that's a long time to come to conclusion.
Sure. Do you have You add anything, MASTURA?
Well, okay. Again, I think regulatory sandbox is it's mentioned a regulatory sandbox, regulatory. So if it doesn't require regulation, why would you put such heavy requirements on the industry to fulfill something, right? I think the thing about blockchain, I think that's a plus for startups is because, ICOs, STOs, and whatever that's come out now or coming out have provided a lot of new ways and new opportunities for startup to actually scale without going through the normal traditional way. So why would we want to stop that? I mean, for what purpose do you want to stop that? I mean, maybe, as a nation or as a country, we should think about it like this. Maybe, recently we did a survey within the Malaysian stakeholders, and from the industry side, they said, okay, here's what we need the government to do. We need your help in terms of regulation, access to market, and the third one was funding. And in that order. So if the regulation is not needed, the second one is access to market. So in terms of that, I think governments should look on how to become enablers in this kind of thing. And if that comes to life, the approach should not be regulatory sandbox, definitely.
Do you have anything to add? Really quickly.
Sure. I think Sandbox is suitable for, if the project that you're trying out it's failing and it has a lot of impact and it's going to hurt a lot of people, then I think Sandbox is an appropriate way to go to try to learn about the risks and also learn how we can monitor, detect, and deter that and manage the risk properly. It's not for everything, of course. So I think even with the Sandbox, a lot of misperception that it's a golden key. It should be used with care as well.
Right. So with that, I think we have our end of the panel. Hopefully, you guys have a fairly good insight about how Sandbox work in some of the country in APAC. And please give an applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we give them another round of applause, please? It's not an easy topic.